வணக்கம் and welcome to தமிழ் சுவை நேர்களே. ஆர்ஜே சுதா பேசுறேன். தமிழ் சுவை ரேடியோ ஒரு ஹோஸ்ட் அண்ட் ஃபவுண்டர். இன்னொரு ப்ரோக்ராம், இன்னொரு விவிஐபி ஒரு கெஸ்ட் நம்மளோட வந்திருக்காங்க. ஆகஸ்ட் 15 2021 எல்லாருக்கும் தெரியும். இந்தியாவோட சுதந்திர தினம் சாதாரண சுதந்திர தினம் இல்ல, 75வது சுதந்திர தினம். ஒவ்வொருத்தர் ஒவ்வொரு மாதிரி கொண்டாடினாங்க. நான் எனக்கு சமையல் மேல ரொம்ப ஆர்வம் இருக்கிறதுனால ஒரு அழகா ஒரு தயிர் சாதம் பண்ணேன். மேல ஒரு தயிர் சாதத்துல நல்லா தாளிச்சு கொட்டி மேல ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஹாஃப் ஆஃப் த தயிர் சாதத்தை 1/3 டிவைட் பண்ணேன். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் 1/3 கேரட்டால டெக்கரேட் பண்ணேன். நடுவுல வெள்ளையா விட்டுட்டேன். அதுக்கு நடுவுல ஒரு ப்ளூபெரியை டெக்கரேட் பண்ணேன். அப்புறம் கீழே ஹைதராபாத் கிரேப்னு சொல்லுவாங்க, அது சின்ன சின்னதா நறுக்கி அதை டெக்கரேட் பண்ணேன். அப்புறம் சைட்ல 75ன்னு போட்டேன். 7 சிகப்புல, 5 பச்சையில போட்டேன். அதே மாதிரி கேரட்டை 7ல போட்டேன். அந்த திராட்சை பச்சையில போட்டேன். அந்த மாதிரி இன்னோவேட்டிவா ஒவ்வொரு அவங்க இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட் பண்ணாங்க. கார்டனிங்ல இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட்ல இருக்கிறவங்க எல்லாம் அவங்க கார்டன்ல என்னெல்லாம் பூ பூத்துதோ அதே மாதிரி பச்சையோ வெள்ளையோ சிகப்போ அது மாதிரி கலர்ஸ் எல்லாம் போட்டு ஒரு அழகா பேட்ச் ஒர்க் பண்ணாங்க. நிறைய பேர் பாடல்ல எக்கச்சக்கமான பீப்புளுக்கு, எக்கச்சக்கமான மனுஷருக்கு ஆர்வம் உண்டு. பேரியால இருந்தாலும் சரி, பேரியால பாத்தீங்கன்னாக்கா மவுண்டன் ஹவுஸ் தினேஷ் பாபு வந்ததும், ஆத்திரேய கணபதி அவங்க எல்லாம் சேர்ந்து பாரத் தமிழ் சங்கம் எல்லாம் சேர்ந்து ரொம்ப அற்புதமான ஒரு அழகான பாடல் நிகழ்ச்சி நடத்தினாங்க. பாடல் ஆர்வம் உள்ளவங்க அப்படிப்படுத்தினாங்க. அதே மாதிரி பேச்சு திறமையில இருக்கிறவங்க ரொம்ப சில பேருக்கு தான் பேச்சு திறமை உண்டு. அவங்க பாத்தீங்கன்னாக்க இசைக்கவி ரமணன் ஐயா பாரதியார் பத்தி அவ்வளவு அழகா பேசினாரு. சொற்பொழிவு எடுத்தார் பாருங்க, அவ்வளவு அழகா இருந்தது. பாரதியார் அவர் when he lived, he did not live to see India in freedom. அவர் இறந்து போனது 1921. அவர் இன்ஃபேக்ட் 100 வருஷம் ஆயிடுச்சு அவங்க பாரதியார் இறந்து போய். ஆனா அவங்க இறந்து போகிறதுக்கு முன்னாடி பாரதத்துக்கு சுதந்திரம் கிடைச்ச மாதிரி பாடுற அவ்வளோ ஒரு ஆவேசம், அவ்வளோ ஒரு உச்சரிப்பு, அவ்வளோ ஒரு சந்தோஷம். இந்தியாவுக்கு சுதந்திரம் கிடைச்சிடணும், அவ்வளோ டிஃப்ரெண்ட் வேரியஸ் டாபிக்ஸ்ல பாரதியார் பாடியிருக்காரு. ஒவ்வொருத்தருக்கும் சுதந்திரத்தை பத்தி, இந்தியாவை பத்தி பாடணும்னாக்கா அவ்வளோ சந்தோஷம். ஆனா பாரதியாரோட கொள்ளு பேத்தியா இருந்தாக்க அவங்களுக்கு எவ்வளவு சந்தோஷமா இருக்கும். அவங்க பத்தி பாரதியார் பத்தி எழுதுனாக்க எவ்வளவு பெரிய சந்தோஷமா இருக்கும். அதை பத்தி கொஞ்சம் யோசிச்சு பாருங்க. நம்மளோட இருக்காங்க மீரா சுந்தரராஜன், பாரதியாரோட கொள்ளு பேத்தி. அவங்க நம்ம ஷோக்கு முன்னாடி வந்திருக்காங்க. ஒரேஷியஸ் ரைட்டர், ஒரேஷியஸ் ரீடர். அந்த சொல்லவே வேண்டாம். அவங்கள பாரதியாரோட கவிதைகள் இருக்கட்டும், அவங்களோட லிட்டரரி ஒர்க்கா இருக்கட்டும், பாரதியார் பத்தி சொன்னாக்க அவர் தொடாத டாபிக்ஸே கிடையாது. பெண்ணுரிமையா இருக்கட்டும், சைல்ட் மேரேஜா இருக்கட்டும், பேட்ரியாட்டிசம், நாட்டு சுதந்திரம் பத்தி பேசுறதா இருக்கட்டும், எவ்வளவு டாபிக்ஸா இருக்கட்டும், அவ்வளவு டாபிக்ஸ் நிறைய கான்ட்ரிபியூட் பண்ணிருக்காரு. அதை பத்தி பேச வந்திருக்காங்க. பிளஸ் அவங்க பாரதியார் எவ்வளவு எழுதி வச்சிருக்காங்களோ அவங்க லிட்ரேச்சர் ஒர்க் எல்லாம் ஒரு புதுசா ரீவேம்ப் பண்ணி ஒரு புஸ்தகமே கொண்டு வந்திருக்காங்க. ஸோ ஹியர் வித் அஸ் வி ஹேவ் Mira SundaraRajan. So welcome aboard, Mira SundaraRajan. எப்படி இருக்கீங்க? How are you doing?
Thank you. ரொம்ப மிக நன்றி சுதா. வணக்கம். எனக்கு ரொம்ப சந்தோஷம். Very happy to celebrate kind of 2 anniversaries at the same time, as you so aptly indicated it. 75th anniversary of India's nationhood, and then of course the 100th anniversary of Bharati's death coming up in September 2021. So I also like to think of it as the 100th anniversary of the birth of his legacy, which is a slightly happier way of phrasing that important occasion.
Yes. Wonderful. So Mira, if I can call you so, you have come up with a new book. Could you tell us about this new book? Why did you come up with this? What's the title of the book and things like that?
Yes, I'm very, very happy to do that. It's just taking me a moment to restore my concentration after hearing about your wonderful Independence Day Tair Sadam. My mind is just taking a little time to get back to the present moment. But I think I can do that. And I've got something equally exciting to talk about. The literary area, which is this new book. And actually, I'm very, very excited about it for a number of reasons. So it is a new collection of Bharati's writing in the English language. So as many people know, he was a great linguist, not only did he read and write in Tamil, but he both read and was both reading and writing in other languages as well, including a number of languages, Sanskrit, Hindi, other languages, Indian languages. He had a good knowledge of French and, of course, English. He did a lot of writing in English, and that hasn't necessarily been enjoying the attention, I think, that it should have had. And so here's an occasion now to present a new edition of his English writings. And it's being done, I think, in a very wonderful style suited for Bharati, because the publisher is Penguin Modern Classics. And so absolutely recognizing Bharati's stature as an Indian writer and the importance of the writing that he has done both in English and, of course, in Tamil. So Penguin Modern Classics is presenting it, and it's a particular source of happiness for me because my mother, who of course was a great Bharati scholar, Dr. S. Vijaya Bharati, in fact, she created the field of Bharati criticism. She was the first person to do that. She had this vision that actually we should publish all of Bharati's writings in Tamil and in other languages, including English, and make the full extent of his genius known and bring his thought to everybody who can possibly have access to it and enjoy it and benefit from it, whether or not Tamil is their mother tongue or they know how to read in Tamil.
Very well said. I was actually thinking about it. Google, any Western media, top 10 leaders who fought for Indian independence. முதல்ல எடுத்த உடனே they will say Gandhiji, Nehruji, Subhash Chandra Bose, of course Rani Lakshmibai, அது மாதிரிலாம் போடுவாங்க. அது வரிசையில வந்து நம்ம ராஜாஜியோ, காமராஜரோ, சுப்பிரமணிய பாரதி அவங்க பேர்லாம் எடுப்படாது. For some reason மகாகவி பாரதி வந்து சுதந்திரம் கிடைக்கிறதுக்கு முன்னாடியே இறந்துப்பட்டார். பட் ஆனா சுதந்திரம் கிடைக்கிறதுக்கு முன்னாடி ஒரு கேட்டலிஸ்டா இருந்திருக்காரு. He was such a motivation. He motivated. He made such a critical role in inspiring people for participating in the freedom fight here. So there were so many things that he did. So I think this book will not only create awareness amongst the people who don't know about Bharati's role or even Kamaraja's role or whatever it is, but in the Western world who have known only Nehruji's or Mahatma Gandhiji's, not to belittle their role, but will also create awareness about Mahakavi's role, and not only just role in Tamil literature, but also in English literature.
This is such an important point that you've brought up, Sudha, and it's such a complex one also, because one of the things that I've learned over the past year, so actually this book has been almost about a decade in the making now. So my mother and I discussed it. My father was an English scholar, so he helped a lot to get things on board in terms of how we would approach the English in the book, because of course we're talking about the English language as Bharatiya was writing it more than 100 years ago. So what could we do to present that and make it accessible to the modern audience? So a lot of thought has gone into this, a lot of work has gone into this. And one of the things that's emerged for me over the past year when I've been intensively rereading the manuscript and so on is, he's talking about the national movement from a unique perspective. Here's a man who was involved in the very thick of it, who dedicated his whole life to the cause of Indian independence, was constantly living, breathing, sleeping with this idea, in his mind. And what you see is that frankly, the brutality with which the British government was suppressing people like him, making it impossible for their voices to be heard and for their words to be known by the public. Literally, all of Bharati's writing became proscribed by the British. And then he was in a situation where, he's a writer. He has to write and publish. He has to reach his audience. How is he supposed to do that in such
He was also working for a newspaper organization in Calcutta.
He was indeed, yes. And in fact, he worked for a number of news organizations, a famous one, of course, being Swadesamitran, but he did so much work as a journalist. He started his own journals when he was in exile in Pondicherry, Vijaya, and so on. And, I think that there is a reason why the modern world, especially outside India, they don't know the full extent of the contributions of Bharati, and no doubt other important nationalists from throughout the Indian subcontinent as well. And the reason is very simple. It's because their writing was suppressed. So this is a legacy of colonialism. That writing has been suppressed by the British government and it never found its way out. Then independence happened and so on, but the process of decolonization is going to take a long time. And one of the important steps is that an important writer like Bharati, his work should be brought out from underneath the colonial repression and made known freely to the public. And I think it's a much larger agenda, bringing the Mahakavi's work, obviously it's a huge step, but I think it's a very large agenda involving all of the Indian writers, the freedom fighters, the people who took literature forward in the Indian languages while the British were dominating the country. They made a very active attempt to suppress and wipe out what these people were doing. And that's something that we're now in the process of being able to undo as far as possible to struggle against that.
It's not only what I see, it's not only just the media or the government, that the Western media that try to suppress, the Britishers that try to suppress the fantastic writers and inspirational national leaders like Bharati, who had, pen is power. Pen is power, that is word, as they say. Very clearly, Bharati's works had so much of power, and they saw it as a threat. And now that we have obtained freedom, now the power of the pen can be used in so many other ways. The next generation of Indian children living all over the world, they will learn if the language of presentation is English. And since English is a universally accepted language, universally understood language by the next generation, the next 3 or 4 generations, reading through Bharati's material is going to be oh my goodness, we had such a leader in India, and especially Tamil Nadu, they will be awestruck. This is going to be an amazing eye-opener for the next generation period.
Yeah, this is exactly my hope, because it's so true what you're saying. We as people coming from the Indian subcontinent and all the other places where Tamil is also spoken as a language, many of us come and resettle in Europe or in North America, Australia, and so on. And I think this is a tremendous challenge that we face, that, our existence then becomes bifurcated. On the one hand, we've got our, traditional language and our culture. And then on the other hand, we're faced with adapting to the new environment.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, I think things are a lot better now. Let me maybe start by saying that things are a lot better now than when I was growing up. For example, I was born in Canada, and I was probably, we were maybe one of 2 or 3 Tamil speaking families in the entire town where I grew up. So today it's not quite like that. You can go online, you can find some materials to help you with learning Tamil, you can listen to broadcasts and so on. And so it's a lot easier today to kind of maintain the Tamil language identity than it used to be. But the fact is, it's still a challenge.
Yes.
It's still not as easy to have access to the Tamil language, I would say, than to French, which is a language that I speak, or, other European languages. So with this book, I think that's right. It opens a window for people who are spending a lot of time in these parts, or who are born in these parts, to have access to somebody important from Tamil culture, from their traditional culture. And the book really represents Bharati very, very well, very comprehensively, because just like he wrote about so many topics in Tamil, he was equally curious and exploratory as a writer in English. And the range of topics that he covers in the English writings is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So it opens a window onto the thought. It lets us know what is our culture, because a great person like Bharati, he's writing about that. He's explaining what our culture is, how our people think, where our traditions come from, who we are. So it opens a window onto all of that. And then, of course, you get excited about it and you think, well, you know what? Maybe I could learn Tamil. Maybe I could read some more Bharati. Maybe I could find out a little bit more about this beautiful,
kick in your curiosity to learn more about Bharati's works, and then more to learn about Tamil language. And
exactly. And about the culture that we come from, which I think it's actually very important at so many levels. It's part of our identity, but also I think that Tamil culture has something so important to contribute to the world. Tamil culture does, Indian culture does, because this is a culture that has been there for so long, that has integrated so much of world currents and different philosophies, ways of life, religions, languages, and has done that successfully over such a long period of time. in the very divisive world that we live in at the present moment, here is a totally different perspective and totally different approach. So I think this is a win-win situation for everyone, for us, and then for people who want to learn about Tamil culture. I don't think there could be a better source.
Yeah. It's basically we're creating awareness amongst not just the Indians, but also among the rest of the world.
Yeah, again, such an important point, Sudha, if I can just take a moment to comment on that, because, our Tamil culture, it's our culture, but at the same time, people like Bharati, they belong to us, he belongs to India, and he belongs to the world. And that's how he saw himself. And that's what emerges when you read these writings. He saw himself as a citizen of the world, very proud of his culture and his identity, and meeting everyone else on terms of equality. So chauvinism, looking down on someone else, was totally absolutely alien to the way that he thought about anything. So it's all about celebrating and sharing. And that's so beautiful to see in this book.
When you talk about celebration, he celebrated equality, celebrated women empowerment. He believed that women should be given equal right. He was against child marriage during that period when he was growing up. That it was just so common that the women would get girl children would get married so early. So all those things he was so much against, and he was also all about encouraging children to get up early, get out and play rather than just sit down. And I mean, so many things that he talked about those days and sang about those days and he wrote about those days, they seem to be so relevant now. When you try to talk about Black Lives Matter movement that we had and all the work that we had and what he talked about equality, everybody belongs to the same thing. We're all children of God. There is no difference between Hindu or a Muslim or whatever it is. We're all the same. We're all children of God, and women should be treated as good as men. No women should be just confined to the kitchen. Everybody should be participating in the freedom movement, because this freedom is not just a man's problem; it's a women's problem. Because it is the universe. It's India's problem. So everybody gets to enjoy freedom, and whatever he said seems to make so much sense only now to me. When I read more and more, I read his work. He seems so ahead of his times, which I can't even explain how blessed our country was, how blessed Tamil Nadu was, how blessed we are to be reading his material, and how blessed I am to be associated with you, Mira. Totally thankful that our paths are crossed at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it creates such a sense of pride. And this is the overwhelming feeling that I have, in presenting this book, that it's a pride for me as a person of Tamil heritage and Indian heritage. And of course, my great-grandfather. I feel like you, I feel 100 times blessed in order to be able to do this. And the points that you raise, again, I mean, it's so relevant. See, I think it's no accident that Bharati seems relevant today. In fact, you could even say more relevant than ever. I mean, he's always relevant, but absolutely, today you're just struck by the correspondences between all of these kinds of conflicts and problems we're facing, and the worldview, the attitudes, everything that he is putting forth in his writing. That's no accident. I think it's because he was a visionary. He's a poet, first and foremost. He's a visionary. And so when he was writing, he saw ahead in time. He wasn't just writing about, okay, what's happening today, but he was looking forward to what kind of society do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to create? And we can do that. I'm a poet. My words can help to create that world. People can create that world in everything that they do, how they have their families, how they have their lives at home, how they deal with their neighbor, with their profession, everything. Let's build the world that we want. And so very much you get that feeling that he's writing for the future and for us, for the readers of the future when you look at these works. And he's saying, have that beautiful world, make it the world where everybody's going to be equal and where freedom is going to be recognized as the birthright of every human being. That is the foundation. And that's why, as you say, it's about equality for everybody. Freedom is a woman's problem, absolutely, because freedom is a woman's birthright. Let's say that openly. Freedom is the birthright of every Black person in this country, of every Indigenous person in Canada, and in fact, it's my particular hope that there may be a way to reach people from all the wonderful diverse communities here in the United States and Canada, where I was born myself. And all of these communities should also get to know about Bharati and see, well, look, here's our friend. Here's a man who is advocating for us. It happened to be that he was doing it in South India back in, the early part of the 20th century, but he was talking to us back then. He saw us. And it's just an amazing thing.
Yeah, definitely. Tell us more about the book itself, the content. If you can read a page or two from the book, that would be a nice section.
Well, I'm in a little bit of embarrassment in terms of being able to read from the book because
That's
I haven't
okay.
yet received.
Oh,
I haven't
okay.
yet received my audio copies of the book.
Okay,
given the present situation and the shipping and so on. But I will be in a position to do that shortly. But I can definitely tell you all about the book since most of it is etched in my memory regardless. But yeah, so basically it's a collection of most of Bharati's writing in English. It's not totally comprehensive. There's some other things that he did, some letters and things that he wrote that aren't included, but it's a good, very representative sample of most of the writing that he did in English. And it's split into a number of different categories to reflect the different subjects that he wrote on, because as we all know, Bharati was totally a multifaceted personality, really a Renaissance man in the best sense of what that term means. And so basically you have essays that he wrote on nationalism. You've got essays that he wrote about Indian philosophy, about Indian culture. There are some translations there that he's done, not only of his own poems, but of Tamil classics. So he's done, Nachiyar poems. He's done some translations, beautiful translations. And then he's also included some explanations. So this is partly what I meant when he said he was writing for us reading today, because he gives us all the background that we need in order to read and understand, even if we're coming to these works totally new, which of course no Tamilian is, but lots of people who might get interested in the book might be in such a situation. And then he writes some very important and interesting articles about the whole prospect of individual rights and freedoms. He writes about the Tamil language, of course, and the struggle that was then being faced because the British government wanted to impose English education in India, and how they talked about the national languages. I call them the national languages of India, but the term used by the British was vernaculars. And it absolutely gets Bharatiya so angry. And he says, well, here we are. We have this ancient classical language with great epics going back, hundreds, even thousands of years. And it's no mere vernacular language. The status of our language also has to be recognized. And our people have to understand the value of that and be able to pursue an education in it. So this was a great debate that was sadly necessary at that time. And he writes about that quite a bit. And then, of course, he has numerous essays on social issues, just like those that you've raised. So he talks extensively about women's rights, and very, very striking, impressive pieces he's written about the situation of women. And he uses what he calls very strong language. He says, let us not balk at strong language when we have to talk about terrible situations. He says, our women today are slaves. That is a quote. He says, our women today are slaves, and immediately that situation must be changed. And there, his fiery, poetic personality.
That's the time. The women would just get out of the house and start, they would have a walkout, I'm sure. It was so powerful. I can imagine what an effect that must have had, even in his own household, right? I mean, there's a dog that his wife was taken very good care of, but I'm sure when his neighborhood women would listen to his talk or his poems, I can imagine how the women felt about their own life status and where they're headed to. And then they say, oh, yes, I am seen. Looks like I am being a slave. I need to get out and fight because they're all being ruled over by foreign men. Why should we be under this? And at home also, I'm being dominated by men. I'm not going to live this kind of a life. So I think he gave this kind of a vision that we should, all women should not just be confined to home. And,
I think the gift that he has given to womanhood, both Indian womanhood and women all over the world, is just incalculable. Because the clarity with which he recognizes the situation, and also the practical way that he looks at it, because he sees both the concept and the practice. That's one of the wonderful things about him. And he says, well, women should be free. They must have their birthright as freedom, and that must be recognized. And what do we do? Well, let's take them with us to the national protests. Let's take them with us to our work. Let's include them in everything that we're doing. So he also had this very practical perspective. A woman's place is not in the kitchen and in the home. A woman's place is out in the world, being free and being the leaders of our movement and of our country.
Wonderful.
See, that point, Sudha, he says again and again. He doesn't just say women are equal. He says, actually, women are superior. And he explains why.
Equated them to Devis. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And he says that it's because women play a role in conserving the culture and conserving the traditions. That's traditionally been what they do in the society. And their presence signifies the continuity of the culture. So in a sense, a woman's primary role is not just to bring new people, but it's also to bring the culture into the next generation and carry it forward. And so he says women should be leading the society. And that's his goal. And another point I just can't resist picking up, you bring up so many interesting things. The things I could say are endless here. But I'll pick up that very important point, because you said, well, he was inspiring the women in his home. And I think that point just can't be emphasized enough. Because again, he was not just a poet whose head was in the clouds and he was writing about some beautiful ideas. He did that, and then he brought those beautiful ideas right into his home and his heart, and he lived them.
He breathed and lived.
Yeah, totally. So at home, his wife was a free woman. His two daughters were free women. And that was the starting point for everything. So absolutely, I would say the first Pudumai pen that Bharati actually saw with his own eyes was Chellamma, his own wife. And that was the basis on which they lived.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Is there any other point that you would like to highlight about the societal equality in the society, about how we have this Black Lives Movement here, where one community seems to think they are superior to the other, and things like that, and how he said there's no such thing, that we're all equal, and things. Is there some topic that you have discussed in the book?
Well, I mean, it's a theme that comes up over and over again in most of what was written in the book, because it's such a fundamental idea that Bharati had. And remember, it's actually, I think, a bit difficult for us to think back to the environment in which he was living when he wrote this, because even today, things are far from perfect, but at that time they were even worse. So he was writing about this at a time where it was considered normal for a white Britisher to discriminate against an Indian. Yes. That was considered normal. And so keeping that in mind, that theme is something that he returns to over and over again. It's a foundation of everything else that he wrote, that each individual human being has to be respected. And you simply can't have a situation where one group is oppressing another. I mean, maybe one more point I can highlight there is he makes a very important sort of statement there, recognizing that when these relations of oppression occur, both the oppressed and the oppressor are demeaned by them. And I think that's a key insight that we have to have.
Okay.
That there is no winner in those situations of oppression. Everyone ultimately ends up losing out. And that's a very complex idea. We could easily talk for 40 minutes just about that. But I think it's well worth thinking about, the cultural degradation and the sort of loss of human values that occurs across the board when we fail to recognize the basic tenet of equality. Definitely. I mean, you've mentioned Black Lives Matter several times. And I think, that's such an important and moving sort of situation to think about. I was
trying to map the current situation to what Bharati wrote so many years back, more than 100 years back, more than a century back.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to touch. But I just want to create awareness that he was so ahead of his times. Over and over again, for each of the topics that he picked, he was so ahead of his times. And he was, as you said, he was not just a poet who could just who could write about romance, who could write about some stories here and there, but he was a visionary who would think about what things could happen, how things can be corrected, and how we can go on a smoother path in future.
And that's what gives such depth to everything that he wrote. I mean, one of the striking things about the essays in this book is many of them are quite short. There are some that are lengthy, you know, where he's writing about things that happened. And the reason for that, you know, he's writing about things that happened during the British occupation and so on. I'm sure that he had it in mind that he was creating a document there, you know, that explained a lot of the historical situations. And those are invaluable documents because you can't find the information so easily. You know, as you said, here they talk about the national movement, it's Gandhi, it's Nehru, and absolutely no denying the contributions of those great Indians. But then, you know, there's also Bharati, and there are many
Maharaj,
people. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big community. It's a
Yeah.
big community all over India. And so there are those longer essays, but some of the essays, most of them actually are quite short. You know, sometimes it might be even just a page that you read. And what's amazing about his writing is even in a couple of sentences, he can tell you so much. He can communicate so much. And I think the reason for that is what you just said. It's because he had this visionary capacity and it informed everything that he wrote. So it's not like he ever wrote with part of himself or part of his thinking. The whole of his thinking and knowledge came into every sentence that he wrote. And that's the richness. So let's say you're busy and you're listening to this broadcast and you think, oh gosh, this sounds interesting, but you know, probably I'm not going to be able to find time to do a lot of reading. Don't worry, pick up the book and just open it. You'll see a page there. You can read it and you can get so much out of that. So he is very generous in giving to the reader. It's not difficult to read and learn.
Mira, you also mentioned about a podcast that's coming up. Could you explain to me what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to start a podcast in order to honor the 100th anniversary of Bharati's passing. So I'm planning to launch it in September, on September 11th, actually.
Nice.
And the whole idea is to have a podcast that accompanies the book. So basically in each episode, you know, it's going to be, each episode should be quite short, like I would say 10 to 20 minutes. And then in each episode, I'm going to be providing a little bit of background and then talking about one of the pieces in the book.
Very
so
nice.
I'm going to go through systematically. There are about 50 to 60 pieces in the book, I think. So each one will be a subject of a podcast. Some will have more than one, depending on if there's more matter there. And I'll be providing some episodes that have background information too. So some of the interesting things in the early episodes will be, I've just completed an interview on film with Michael Wood, who's, you might know, BBC filmmaker who's done some wonderful work on India and is a great lover of Tamil culture. Notably, his program, The Story of India. So we've completed an interview together where he's talked to me about the book. And part of that is going to be appearing on the podcast.
Awesome.
I'll be featuring a lot of interesting music. There will be singing done by my mother and by some other members of the Bharati family, which would be Bharati songs in the original way in which Bharati taught it to his own family members. So it's an oral tradition in the family going back. And also a number of prominent musicians have agreed to support the work. So a number of prominent Carnatic musicians have provided music for the cover and to use in the course of the podcast as well. So it's quite a nice little cultural snapshot of.
I can't wait to hear that. Okay, beautiful.
Thank you so
much. Tell us about the book itself. How can the listeners get access to the book?
Yeah, so it's very easy to find the book here in the Bay Area. Most bookstores are carrying it. You can, I think for now, it'd be best to order it online because it's just been published. So the actual physical supply of the books from India hasn't reached here yet, but you can order it through any of the regular Bay Area book retailers. I ordered a copy through Books Inc., which is my local bookstore in Berkeley. And I would expect Penguin Classics is actually making a big push to have a presence on Amazon. So they're going to be having a storefront and so on Amazon India, but I would expect that they will have a very good availability on Amazon US eventually. We're doing all the marketing for the book now and just trying to make it as widely available as we can.
I think every effort that you take here in this strength is worth it completely. Definitely worth it. Very nice. Any final words, Mira?
Well, my final words would just be, this is the 100th anniversary for Bharati, 75th anniversary for India. So final words are very simple. Read Bharati. Here's a great chance to do that. Read, enjoy, benefit,
Inspire, be inspired.
inspire, pass it on to your friends, to your children, your relatives, share it, spread the word, because there's something beautiful here that the whole world is standing to benefit from. And I just can't wait to do that myself.
Yeah, I think my final word would be to cherish Bharati.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mira. Wonderful having you, and good luck with everything, the whole process. And if at all there is anything that I can help you with furthering the movement of the book or the words, please do count on me. All right.
Thank you so much, Sudha.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.